Opened the door, open the door, let the dogs out. Could hear the rain coming down, and was like, nope.
Mhm. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm zooming in. This is Kate, your immediate past president from almost Pennsylvania, and it's colder where you are. Ha ha ha! It's warmer where I am in the more south. I know it hits sometimes. It is 7 a.m. Oh, 7:01. Let's call this meeting to order. I am glad to see some of us, looks like on Zoom, some of us in person. I don't know the way the room looks empty, but doesn't mean it's empty. I would love to hear from, maybe I guess we could do announcements later because we'll let people roll in. I'm sure we'll have folks coming in late. So since Tracy is at the lectern and she knows who is there in the room, I'll share who's on Zoom, who I can see, and I would love to welcome one of our guests. We've got Mike Licata, Eric Schneider on Zoom, Maggie Craig, Margot Bittner, David Jones, Program Quality Director, District 38, North Carolina, Carol Halstead, my mom, Beth Banks, and I think that's it on Zoom, except our most welcome and honored Area 11 Director and Mr. Richard Teal. I was the immediate past Area 11 Director. I think you remember that, but welcome back to our club. Thank you for being here. I'm sure there will be time during the meeting for you to chat with us, I hope.
Thank you.
Awesome. Where are you, Richard? Where are you zooming in from today?
From Virginia.
From Virginia. You're in Virginia. That's your
Yes.
residence, correct?
Yes, it is.
It is
Yeah.
so good to see you. So it's probably not as icy there, but I
Right.
did hear it was in the 30s in North Carolina, where David Shannon, our member who just moved to North Carolina, was yesterday in the 30s. So how's the weather, Richard, in Virginia? Where are you?
We had snow yesterday, so we actually had snow on the ground for the
We
second
sent that
time.
to you. Oh gosh, snow on the ground, just a
Yes.
dusting.
Oh,
Stop traffic.
well, at least I don't deal with as much as I did when I lived in Binghamton, so I'm okay with it.
Binghamton, that's part of my new work territory team. So, yeah, we get it harder, I think, in Buffalo, but
Yes.
Binghamton definitely more than Virginia. So, and
Yes.
I saw a few more trickle in. Looks like Phil Russell and Marty Johnston zooming in instead. Now, back to you, Tracy, for anybody else I missed on Zoom and who's there in person. Madam Toastmaster of the day.
All right, I'll just go over who is in the room real quick. We have Mark Campos, Len Thornton, Jackie Kenny, and Dave Licata. We'll start off our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you, fellow Toastmasters. And I'll have to start off with an inspiration. Zach Brado was actually the only one who hasn't confirmed. So our inspiration for today is there is only one happiness in life, to love and be loved. Let us conduct this Toastmasters meeting with love and gentle guidance towards our fellow Toastmasters. And so I have to talk about Valentine's Day since that is tomorrow. And we can't let Hallmark get away with just sugarcoating everything and making it a nice, sweet Hallmark channel with Valentine's Day movies. So we're going to look a little bit on the dark side of Valentine's Day, just to make it fun. So did you know that the origins of Valentine's started with the feast of Lupercalia? And if my Italian's off, I'm sorry, but it would run from February 13th to the 15th. And this is when the Romans celebrated the feast. And it started off with two naked men whose foreheads were smeared with the blood of a goat across their forehead. And then later they cut that hide and those two men would run through the streets and whip any of the women that were in the streets. And being true Roman style, these women were begging to be whipped because they thought it would make them more fertile. To go on, as the days went on during the feast, men would randomly pick out a name in a jar, a woman's name from a jar, and they would be coupled with this woman for the duration of the feast. Not surprisingly, well, I should say surprisingly, often these couples would stay together until the feast next year, and many actually fell in love and married. So that's the origins of Valentine's Day, and we'll talk more about where this comes from. I'm going to start off with our job holders for the day and our word master, Phil Russell. I know you sent over the word, but can you tell us the word and give us some examples?
Yes, infatuation. I'm going to spell that Infatuation. It's a noun. So let's talk about it is a feeling of foolish or obsessively strong love for, admiration for, or interest in someone or something, strong and unreasoning attachment. It's quite a few words for me, especially at this time of the morning. She speaks openly about a real life subject of one of her songs. A conservatory teacher who is both a neighbor and in her apartment building and the unwilling object of her obsessive infatuation. Sasha Free Jones. So there's your word, infatuation. Use it today in table topics for must, and use it anytime you want. And if you have any infatuations, bring them out. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Phil. In keeping with making the dark side of Valentine's Day, we will all state our infatuations for the week. Next job holder is Eric Schneider, and he is our master. Eric, can you tell us your job for the day?
Yes, I can. Thank you, ma'am, Toastmaster. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and our guest, Richard. Um, Sorry, I can't turn on my video right now, but I'll turn it on in a minute. But as your on master, I will be counting the ahs, ums, and keeping with the so's and whatnot. So I'll be keeping tally of everything that goes on with the meeting today. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Eric. I have to point out for everybody in Zoom, I now have a step stool to stand on so you can see me behind. Thank you, Len Thornton. So we don't have a grammarian today. Our grammarian had to step out at the last minute. Is there anybody that wants to step up for that role? And Len has stepped up to the role of grammarian. Len, can you tell us what you'll be doing today?
Certainly, as we're an English speaking club, my job is to listen to everybody's English, point out the highlights and the lowlights of our speaking opportunities this morning, and report at the end of the meeting. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Len. Our next job holder is Jackie Kenny. She's our quote master for the day. She's going to let us know some quotes about Valentine's Day, I'm assuming. Jackie Kenny.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning and happy Valentine's Day tomorrow. Valentine's Day celebrates or commemorates the beheading of Valentine in Rome in 270 AD. His skull's on display there in case anybody wants to visit it. They're big on that in Rome. Churches are full of displays of bones and people's hearts and all kinds of strange things. So he signed a note to a young woman from your Valentine, and somehow that became something we do all around the world. To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. That's from Oscar Wilde. And Plato said, at the touch of love, everyone becomes a poet. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And Carol Ann, do you have a jest for us today? Carol Ann.
Yes. The first is, what is Cupid's favorite band? That would be Kiss. What's the difference between you and a calendar? A calendar has a date on for Valentine's Day. What did the chef give his wife on Valentine's Day? It would be a hug and a quiche. And what did the farmer give his wife? Hogs and kisses. And finally, why do melons have to get married in a church? Because they cantaloupe.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you, Carol Ann. And next is our timer. Kate, can you give us an idea of what you'll be doing as timer?
I was trying, let me tell you. I'm wondering if Mark, or I know Len already stepped up for another role, but I'm wondering if, since you often shadow the Zoom, I tried to reload you. They let me in a couple times. I'm on two different devices, and it is just not working for me. So I apologize for that. Mark or anyone, what do you think there as timer?
And they are both volunteering. Sort
I
of.
appreciate you gentlemen so much. Like for Richard, for our guest Richard, our table topics, we challenge our table topics participants to go a little longer. So our typical table topics was 1.5 to 2.5, 1.5 to 2 minutes. I'll let them say it because I'm probably saying it wrong anyway. And then the traditional speaking, 5 to 7, typically we'll also obviously see something different. And evaluations 2 to 3 minutes, with the green at 2, the yellow or amber at 2.5, and the red.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. And since we have Mark and Len doing the timing, did you want to step in and be our quiz master for the day? Oh, she checked out, which is fine. We will pass over that job holder. I know Joe was sick at the last minute and wasn't able to fulfill his role. So we're going to go on to table topics. Jill, I know, is doing table topics, and she's also being evaluated since she's working on this project in her pathways manual, and Steve will be evaluating her as the general evaluator at the end. So Jill, bring forth our table topics.
Thank you, Tracy. Oh, this works out pretty good. Mike's at the right height for me here. If I push the little stool away. Okay. It's going to take a minute because we got here late, obviously, because of the weather. So I'm trying to work through who has jobs and who doesn't. Beth does not have a job. Margot doesn't. Richard doesn't.
Oops, I'm an evaluator.
You're an evaluator? Okay. I didn't look
If
down
you need me, that's
didn't look
life.
down far enough. Okay. And then there's Carol Ann is already done with her role. And Eric and Jackie too. Okay. All right. Valentine's Day, you'd think it'd be easy to come up with questions. But I wanted to come up with relevant questions. And I am going to have Beth answer this one. Beth, do you think Valentine's Day is overblown?
Oh, let's see. Do I think Valentine's Day is overblown? I would probably have to say yes, as in many of the different holidays. It's always interesting to go on calendars and find out that every day has some special day. We have Donut Day and all kinds of things. Valentine's, especially when you hear from Jackie that his head is in Rome. It's a little creepy. I know it is the very ancient Catholic way of doing things, but those using bones, things like that as relics, just kind of creeps me out, I have to say. I'm definitely not infatuated with that idea. Worshiping bones doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, yes, I think some things are overblown. My husband doesn't really do much for Valentine's Day for me usually because our anniversary was just last month. So he kind of combines them together into one. He did bring me flowers. He loves to bring me flowers. And he also had a football in the floral arrangement for me. The florist thought that was very odd. However, he had to tell her, yes, please put a football in my wife's arrangement. You do not understand what a football fan and how infatuated she is with football. And therefore, football is a good thing to add to her floral arrangement. Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Beth. Your comments about the anniversary leads right into another question that I had wrote up, but I don't know if there's anybody that can fulfill this question. When I was with Keith before Steve, his birthday was on Valentine's Day. Needless to say, I never got anything for Valentine's Day because he didn't think it was worth, I should be getting a gift from him on his day. And he also said that he treated me fantastic the rest of the year. So I was going to ask if somebody had ever been involved with somebody that had a conflict like that with a holiday, but I'm not going to do that because that's too close a question. Okay. Maggie. The mass market has romantic dinners, jewelry, flowers, and candy for Valentine's Day. Probably some other things that I can't think of right now. Describe your perfect Valentine's Day. Does it include any of the above?
Good morning. My perfect Valentine's Day. You know, when my husband and I were first married, we used to go to this restaurant called Pier 4 on Lake Ontario in Toronto. And we made a commitment to each other at that time that every Valentine's Day we would go to Pier 4. We would have lobster and steak and, a wonderful view. And it was terrible in one way because to get to the pier, it was always February. It was cold. You'd have to walk way out on the pier to this restaurant. But it was so romantic. And we thought, this is the perfect Valentine's Day. Then one year we went, and I guess it had been taken over by a new chef, new company. It was the worst food. It was overpriced. It was terrible. So we weren't going to do that anymore. But we would do something, except we didn't really. Those were our infatuation days. We were still infatuated with each other. But you know what happened? It's very interesting with relationships is our infatuation ended. And one day I actually really fell in love with my husband. And I will be honest with you, I don't really care now if we go for something special. However, yesterday my husband was talking about where we might want to go for dinner for Valentine's Day. And I said, you do realize like Valentine's is in 2 days. If you don't have reservations, I don't think, and he said, oh, no, I said, it's tomorrow. He said, no, it's on Friday, so I have 2 days. And I said, precisely why December 24th comes before December 25th. You always wait to the last minute. I hope you find somewhere special, though I did mention to him that I don't really care. We don't have to go anywhere. I'd be happy to cook. But he promised me a meal out, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, to all of you, happy Valentine's Day. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Maggie. Brings to mind what my Valentine's Day is going to be this year. Steve will be going. Okay. Now, Richard Teal, are you up to a question?
Sure.
Okay. Quite a few years ago, Valentine's Day happened, but the night before, Wilson got hammered with a northeast snowstorm. We had 3 feet of snow overnight, it seemed. The flower shop across the street, you couldn't get to it. It really hurt their Valentine's Day. Do you ever remember the weather destroying a Valentine's Day or any other celebration?
I don't recall having a holiday ruined by a weather event. However, I can talk to some holidays that for me personally were ruined as a kid because I was very sick. I recall a Thanksgiving day when I slept through the whole Thanksgiving and I was looking forward to the Thanksgiving meal, and I ended up a day later having to have leftovers. And then I also recall, I think it was probably the following year, maybe about when I was in second grade, it was Christmas, and looking so forward to that, to Christmas Day, and having the time off from school. But lo and behold, as soon as I got off the bus and got home, started itching. And mom takes a look and says, oh, you got chicken pox. So I had chicken pox over the Christmas break. And of course, I slept through Christmas that year because I was really ended up sick with chicken pox. And I was over my chicken pox just before we went back to school. So I was able to go back to school at the end of the Christmas break. So that's my childhood. There's at least 2 holidays that I recall being ruined from just being sick. It wasn't to the weather or anything, but I would say, I was really infatuated with looking forward to Christmas presents under the tree, but I did get them a few days later on that Christmas break. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, or Tabletop Toastmaster.
Thank you, Richard. I was often sick on Christmas because it turns out I was allergic to pine trees. And that would be very unpleasant at Christmas time with a Christmas tree in the house. So let's see. I'm going to let Tracy come back up and take care of the reports.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you for all those wonderful questions about Valentine's Day. First off, we're going to start off with the word report. Phil, can you tell us if all of our contestants used the word of the day?
Yes, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guest Richard, who I forgot at the very beginning. My goodness, Richard used that word, got it in. I didn't even remind him. Holy cow, that's great, Richard. And Beth used it twice, and Maggie used it twice. So infatuation is being used for table topics, but I didn't hear anybody else say about it except for Tracy at the very beginning. So remember that word, infatuation. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Phil. And our next report will be from Len. He'll tell us how all of our contestants did in timing.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm pleased to report all three of our contestants fell within the required guidelines for time. Their infatuation with the stopwatch was right on mark. Beth for 154, Maggie at 204, and Richard at 147. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you. So everybody can vote for Beth, Maggie, or Richard. And while you're voting, I'm going to invite our general evaluator up. He's going to tell us his role for the day, and he will be evaluating Jill on her table topics project. Steve.
Yep. I'm the general evaluator today, which means I have to evaluate the Toastmaster, the evaluators, and the general tone of the meeting, and anything else I see that catches my eye. Now, I'm already starting out behind the 8 ball for a couple of reasons. One, we got here late due to the weather. As a matter of fact, we saw a car on its side on BB Road on the way here. We had to slow up to go around all that fire control traffic. And the wiper fell off the car. I had to stop and put that back on. But I'm not going to apologize. We should have left earlier. Anyway, but we got here in one piece. That's a good thing, I hope. So I will be evaluating all of that, even though I'm starting behind the 8 ball on it because I missed the first few minutes of the meeting. But we'll get to that when I do my report later. As to Jill, her project today was table topics, and I was to evaluate her based on her listening skills. And I thought she employed them quite well. She had some personal stories interwoven with the different questions, and she worked off of what the speakers had said to continue forward for the next questions. I don't think I need to do a long evaluation here, but I think she accomplished her goal in listening and responding to what was out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for that wonderful evaluation. So I'm going to talk about Valentine's Day in my life. When Mike and I first got together, of course, we were infatuated, and the perfect date night for me was, yes, frozen pizza, homemade wine, and a Netflix video. As life went on, we kind of got really, really busy, and we never have dinner together. We're off in our separate ways. And we kind of said, okay, let's do something this Valentine's Day. We often did do something. But then in the end, we're like, no, let's go back to our roots. Let's sit home. Let's have a homemade meal and a good movie on Netflix. So that's what we're doing on Valentine's Day. As our speakers come up and our evaluators, tell us about what your plans are for Valentine's Day, or if you just think, no, this is a Hallmark day and we don't believe in it. But St. Valentine's, there's a lot of legends around it, and I know it starts in Christianity. St. Valentine's is started in the 14th century after a man named Valentine was executed by the Roman Emperor Claudius after being imprisoned. And while he was there, he was assisting persecuted Christians, secretly marrying them and those couples in love. And as the story goes, he converted the king's daughter to Christianity and brought her to the Christian faith. And for that, he was executed. The legend also tells of another Valentine, so there might be two Saint Valentines. The other Valentine was executed during the same king's reign. And actually, some historians believe that there is a third one, but we don't know too much about that. So I will go on to our speaking portion of the evening. And I'm sorry, I'm leaving the lectern because I was unprepared. I have to get the agenda. Wow, Mr. Evaluator, do you have things to talk about? Our first speaker is David Jones, and he is being evaluated by Margot. Margot, can you tell us what David will be speaking on?
I'd be happy to, Tracy. But you asked about Valentine's Day. I once won an award for Valentine's Day. They did a competition in one of the farm magazines of what you did for Valentine's Day. It was in the early days before children. So I had celebrated the 14 days of Valentine's Day. And every day, starting the 1st to the 14th, I did something for Jim in the barn. Brought him breakfast, brought him fresh coffee, hung up a sign, and we had all these little pictures. So I actually won an award for Valentine's Day. I know, leave it to me. Anyway, David this morning is speaking from the Visionary Communications path. He is in level 3. His elective is called Connect with Storytelling, and his title is something I have an infatuation with at my age. His title today is My Bucket List. So let me introduce David Jones with My Bucket List.
Thank you, Madam Evaluator. And before I get started, I just want to make sure my share screen works. Can you all see the thing in the back?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. And that happens to be my home club's little logo. We are now 71 years old. But thank you, Madam Toastmaster, and good morning, fellow Toastmasters and guests. This year, I turned not 70, my club is 70. I turned 60 years old. And my younger daughter, who's 27, asked, what am I going to do for my birthday? I always try to avoid my birthday. It's really not a big deal to me. I usually just hang low. Although this past birthday, I wanted to spend with my friends at AM Lockport on October 10th, but my father had other plans, and unfortunately, I couldn't visit you all. But after discussing it, we came up with 4 bucket list items, which she volunteered to help me with, meaning I get to pay for her to join me. And one of the main ones was an obsession, an infatuation I have. And it has to do with restaurants, because I believe restaurants are very subjective. We can all say that this restaurant is the best Italian restaurant, or this is the best sushi restaurant, or this restaurant has the best coffee. But what we can't debate is the oldest restaurant in the world. And I am going to try to hit the correct buttons, and it's not working. I apologize. The oldest restaurant in the world is Restaurant Botín. Restaurant Botín is in Madrid, Spain, and this year it celebrates 300 years. For 300 years, its oak ovens have been running through civil wars, through World War I, World War II, depressions, through the pandemic. Every single day, this restaurant had its ovens running and they were serving food. As you can imagine, being 300 years old, it is the undisputed champion, and that is my infatuation to visit the oldest restaurant in the world. Now, many people have been there, politicians and celebrities, but it wasn't until around 1926 that it became famous. It became famous because there was an author by the name of Ernest Hemingway who visited it. And he was finishing a book called The Sun Also Rises, which came out in 1926, in which he mentions that this restaurant was the best restaurant he ever went to. Now, I do have a spoiled alert. When I found out he wrote a book that included Botín, I read the book. And he mentions Botín on the second to the last page of the book. So I had to read through the whole book to find it. But there he mentioned what he ate and the wine he had. And that's when it became a very famous restaurant. It was in the 1920s. And that's my bucket list number 1. I'm going to go to the oldest restaurant in the world. Now, in order to get there is bucket list number 2, high-speed rail. Now, I've never been on a train before other than the train at Disney, which doesn't really count. It's open air. You just kind of go around the park. Same with Dollywood. They have their little train that goes around and hoots and hollers, but they're not real trains. So we're going to be flying into Barcelona in the morning. And from there, we're going to take a 2-hour speed train over to Madrid so we can have lunch at the oldest restaurant. And I get to experience riding on a high-speed train. So that's bucket list number 2. Number 3 is when we get to Barcelona, we're going to stay at the W Hotel. Now, whenever I travel like I am now, I'm in very hot Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the Sheraton Hotel. My company doesn't allow me to stay at the W Hotels. They're usually too expensive. And as you can see, this one is right on the water in Barcelona. And my daughter and I are going to stay there the night before. Bucket list number 4. And if I don't think you can see it, but in the upper right is what bucket number 4 is. And I mentioned in a table topics not too long ago is our transatlantic cruise. We're going to go from Spain to Florida. It's going to take 2 weeks. We're going to stop at a few places in Spain and then jet across or speed across to Bahamas and then into Cape Canaveral. Now, when deciding what ship to take, I've always taken Carnival or Disney or Royal Caribbean, but lately Carnival's had some bad press. But my thinking is individuals that can take 2 weeks off and fly to Spain and then take a cruise for 2 weeks will be a different type of passenger. And that's why I decided to go on Carnival yet again. And the ship we're going to take is their original ship. Back in the 1970s, they had the Mardi Gras. This is a ship that started everything for Carnival Cruise Lines. Now, we're not taking this ship. This ship was decommissioned a long time ago. I think it's a diesel and it doesn't look fun. But a few years ago, they remade the Mardi Gras, and this is it, this big monstrosity, which I think will be a little safer and more fun to cruise across the Atlantic Ocean. But since we're at sea so long, there aren't excursions. Excursions are when you stop at different ports and you get off and you go do different activities. But our excursions are going to be on the ship. I'm going to learn how to make sushi, and I'm going to learn how to make pasta. I have some cooking classes I'm doing. Now, my younger daughter and I tried to make pasta several years ago, and it did not come out well. It was like a belt. It was very thick and nasty. So I'm going to hopefully learn how to do it. So those are my 4 bucket items that I'm going to knock out in October. We're going to go to the oldest restaurant in the world, go on a high-speed train, stay at a nice hotel, and do a transatlantic cruise. And my call to action for all of you is to go ahead and start looking at your bucket list, because you never know what happens. I never thought I'd be 60 years old, but I'm almost there. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, David. And you know what? I want to take up some of those bucket list items. That sounds like fun.
Mhm.
The next speaker is going to be Mark Campos, and he is being evaluated by Mike Licata. Mike, can you tell us what Mark will be speaking on? Mike?
Yes, good morning, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guest this morning. Mark is speaking out of the Presentation Mastery Pathway. This is a level 3 elective, Connect with Storytelling. His job is to use a story in a speech or tell a story as a speech. Mr. Timer, the time is 5 to 7 minutes, and I do believe you have the title correct, Madam Toastmaster.
I do. Thank you, Mike. Today, Mark Campos will be speaking on The Christmas Storm. The Christmas Storm, Mark Campos.
Before we get started, you asked the question about Valentine's Day and what we all do for Valentine's Day. So when I first came to Western New York, my first job was on George Urban Boulevard in Depew. And just down the street from the office is Antoinette's Sweets. So starting in 1996, I would go to Antoinette's and buy candy for my wife and my one daughter at the time. I'm on my 30th year. I'll be heading there later this morning. They have an infatuation with the sponge candy there, but I always get a treat. I always get a reward. After I order all the candy, I order myself a nice vanilla malt, which hits the spot. You can start. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guest, Richard. Good morning. I was not here for the blizzard of 77. But as I mentioned to you, I've been here for 30 winters in Western New York, and I've seen all shapes and sizes of storms and winter seasons. But by far the worst that I remember is the Christmas storm of 2022. This one seemed to be a bit different. I don't recall ever having such emphatic warnings in the weather reports in the days leading up to it, how horrifically bad it would be between the wind and the snow. And it started to get me nervous, uncharacteristically nervous. And I was scared about three things. First and foremost, it being Christmas time, we usually host Christmas Eve. I was worried about losing power. And we lose power frequently in my area of Lockport in the Rapids section, but thankfully it's never for long. But I was worried about an extended power outage. Number two, as I've shared previously, we have a cottage at Sunset Bay. It's prone to flooding. The lake was high at that time. Lots of high winds creates that glorious seiche that floods out Sunset Bay. I was worried about the cottage. Of course, you could classify that as first world problems. Not a lot of people are going to feel too terribly when you say you had some flooding by your cottage. But lastly, and most importantly, I was worried about my younger daughter, who is a registered nurse at Roswell. She had to work the night of the 23rd to the 24th and the 24th to the 25th. Nurses have to really try to get there unless they truly can't get there. And the storm was due to hit on the morning of the 23rd. I had said to my wife, because we have these Christmas traditions, I usually go to Costanzo's Bakery on the morning of the 24th and I get some fresh hard rolls. And then I was due to go to Wegmans. I had to pick up, no one else picks up things, I pick up things. I had to pick up a rib roast for Christmas dinner, but then also a sub platter for my daughter to bring to work. That's what nurses do. When they're stuck working on holidays, they all bring in food and they make the best of it. They have a little party. And I said to my wife, maybe I should advance the pickup a little bit. And she looked at me as if I'm just being a nervous old man, which I guess I'm starting to become. But then I was validated because Wegmans called not once, but twice to request that I advance my pickup time so that they could send their workers home. They were seeing the same weather reports. So on the 23rd, I head out on my journey. I go to Costanzo's and I get my hard rolls. And as I'm leaving the bakery, right to the minute that they had forecasted when the snow would hit, here it comes. Traveled northward, went to Wegmans on Transit Road, got the things I needed to get, and I started to head home. And as I was heading home, it was getting pretty bad. Transit Road was a mess. So we got home, and throughout the day, the snow began to pile up. And my daughter's sleeping in anticipation that she might go to work, but we knew better. We didn't think it was a good idea. And this was clinched by a call I received in the mid-afternoon by a buddy of mine out of Akron who plows for a living. And he emphatically said to me, do not let her out of the house. He had left to go plowing and got halfway down the road, had to turn around and come back. He had never had to do anything like that. So she called in. Now what to do? It's just the three of us at home on the 23rd. Being great Western New Yorkers, we proceeded to eat and drink and try to have a good time. My daughter tried to con me into making a TikTok video. Thankfully, I dodged that, but we wound up starting to play games. And at one point, a few drinks in, we joked around about texting the neighbors to see if they wanted to come over. Now, it's terrible outside. Snow is several feet deep. I sent a group text out. I didn't think anyone would show up. And then here come the replies. And I looked at my wife. I said, Ange, I think they're coming. Sure enough, the bell rang, and here come the neighbors. They had battled their way through waist-deep snow. About a half dozen of them showed up about 8:30, 9 o'clock. And we proceeded to have literally the time of our lives. We played games, drank. You know when you're laughing so hysterically that you're crying? It was one of those nights, and we played games till about 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a wonderful time. The 24th arrives. We did briefly lose power, but no one else could make it to our house for Christmas Eve. And one of the other neighbors tried to have game night part 2, but most of us were in rough shape and weren't really feeling it. And as it turns out, their game night turned out to be a little bit of a dud. I spent about 2.5 hours clearing my driveway that was with a snowblower, and it's not that long of a driveway. On Christmas morning, the skies finally cleared. We were able to have some family come over. Our older daughter and her family lived literally a mile away, around the corner. They couldn't make it on Christmas Eve, but thankfully they could make it on Christmas Day. And we managed to salvage Christmas Day, and we had a great dinner. In retrospect, we did pretty well. We didn't lose power for long. The cottage was safe. I know you were all very worried about that. The cottage is fine. And obviously, our daughter was safe as well. But my lasting memory of all this is that game night. It will never be like that again. You never know when those moments will come up. They can come up out of nowhere, and they can come up in the midst of the most challenging times. Madam Toastmaster.
I love this step stool. Thank you, Mark. And our next speaker is going to be Dave Licata. He's going to be evaluated by Marty Johnston. Marty, can you tell us what Dave will be speaking on?
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guest Richard, welcome. My understanding is that David is practicing his international speech from our club contest on January 16th. The international speech is a speech to inform, or a speech to inspire the audience, 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you,
Tracy, back to you.
Thank you, Marty. We have Dave Licata speaking on the wedding of the waters. Dave Licata.
I'm tempted to use the stool. I'm vertically challenged. All right, a word about Valentine's Day before I get into my practice section. I am part of the Licata family, and we used to own the Jiffy Mart Hallmark card and gift store. So for years, I've been sitting here suffering the slings and arrows of you people complaining about Valentine's Day every year. Also, the thing that would drive me crazy at Licata Brothers Wholesale, we were a candy wholesaler, and we would come back from Christmas, and there'd be an 18-wheeler backed up to the receiving door, and we started unloading Valentine hearts. We didn't even get a breath. So Valentine's Day has always been, I can't remember a really memorable one, and my wife and I do go to little boutique hotels for a night, and I don't even think we did that on Valentine's Day, but being all the kids in my class got used to my parents being in the candy business, so I was a big star Valentine's Day at school. So I had to bring those Necco little rock hard hearts with the messages on them. And you could give a speech someday about how those messages have been upgraded to fit the modern times. But enough about that. All right. Who would care to guess how far we are as we stand here at this very spot? How far are we from the most man-made, the most important man-made waterway in the history of the world? Class? It's when I gave this speech the first time, Katie said 2 miles, and she
1.9.
1.9. Thank you. So it's only 1.9 mile away, and they said, David, how can you claim that embarrassing ditch that I grew up next to is indeed the most important man-made waterway in the history of the world? Well, it's quite easy. Presently, the most technologically advanced thing in present day is anything that happens on the internet. 200 years ago, the Erie Barge Canal was the internet. It was the the most incredible thing in the whole world that they had done this. And how did this come about? There were state fathers. We can't say founding fathers of the country, but we can say fathers of the state of New York, who decided it would be a great idea if you could go from New York Harbor to Lake Erie. But they knew they had to build a canal. But as they looked at the topography of New York State, they said, we can get a lot of water. So we really won't be digging a canal that far because we can tap into different lakes, different creeks, and make it a part of it. This is doable. And they said, you know what else? You know what else is great? The president of the United States down there in Washington, D.C. is a progressive man, and he'll love this idea, and he'll help us. So they got down, and they got an appointment with the president, and it was progressive. It was good old Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson listened to their plans intently. When they were done, Thomas said, you guys are way ahead of your time. You're out of your minds. Please leave my office. How did this come to pass that this progressive man that invented so many inventions of his own shut these gentlemen down with their plans and their ideas? Well, he had a friend, and this friend had an idea that he was going to take the Potomac River, doctor it up a little, build a little canal here and there, hook it up with the Ohio River, and open the American West that way. Anybody care to guess who the friend was? Well, his friend was George. And Thomas Jefferson said, if George Washington can't do it, who the hell do you think you guys are? Get out. But to their credit, they came back to New York State. They made plans to do it on their own. So I imagine it must have been a very hot July 4th. The two crews go to Rome, New York. One looks east, one looks west. They start digging. And this is 1820. So there's no earth moving equipment. There's no gas powered graders, cranes, nothing. So one of the byproducts of this endeavor is they invented so many different ways to pull stumps out of the ground, to move rocks. So this generated things too. And they had all kinds of immigrants, mostly Irish, but every other ethnic group was represented as well. And they started digging the canal. Now, what's important for us is they were going pretty good. Things were easy. Well, never easy, but not draconian. Until they got to Lockport, New York, where they were greeted. Oh, excuse me. It was called Mountain Ridge then. There was no lock. So when they got to this little Quaker community called Mountain Ridge, they were faced with a 61-foot escarpment, the same escarpment that made Niagara Falls, except naturally in Niagara Falls, it's much higher. But it's still an escarpment. And now they're butting up against what very hard stone that has become known as Lockport Dolomite. So they started working, and the engineers decided we're going to have a flight of 5 locks going east, another flight of 5 locks going west, and these are going to be the stair steps to Empire, right here in our hometown. So that's very important. At one time in downtown Lockport, or where they were working on the locks, there was 2,000 boys down there digging. And the things that they went through, unfortunately, are a whole nother speech. But it was rigorous. They didn't keep track of the people that probably got really hurt, maimed, or probably even killed doing this. But my favorite part of the story is they did not have dynamite. Mr. Noble hadn't come up with dynamite yet. So all they had was gunpowder. They take a keg of gunpowder, they stick a cork in it and a little cloth, and the guy, the straw boss or foreman, whatever we want to call him, would light a cigar, and he'd light that piece of cloth, and he'd put that down in the crevice of the moment that he needed some earth moved. and much to the joy and credit of every Lockportian. We are descended from boys that when they heard the boss yell, "Fire in the hole," they used to take their whiskey break, hold their shovel over their heads for protection. We are descended from these geniuses. So the canal was just amazing. The governor did his to celebrate the opening of the canal, came from Albany to Buffalo, went out in the harbor in Buffalo or Lake Erie and got a cask of Lake Erie water, got on the Seneca Chief, took the first packet boat the length of the canal and got to New York Harbor, went out in the harbor and poured the Lake Erie water into New York Harbor. And that's the wedding of the waters. Now, how did the word get out that this wedding had been celebrated? They had cannons lined up all the way back to Buffalo. They'd fire a cannon, the next cannoneers heard it, and so on and so on. And that's how the wedding of the waters took place. Madam Toastmaster.
All right, we're having some issues up here at the lectern. So, thank you. And Len, can you give us an idea of how everybody, their time for the day?
Certainly, Madam Toastmaster, I'm pleased to report that all three of our speakers fell within the time parameters. David at 6:18, Mark at 6:33, and Dave Licata at 7:20. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Len. So if you get a chance, please vote for our three speakers of the day. So Valentine's Day, do you know a jaw-dropping 145 million Valentine's Day cards are sent out every single year? And that doesn't even include those tear apart Valentines that the grade schoolers give out. It is the second largest card holiday besides Christmas. It is the largest holiday for florists in the busiest time of year. They send out about 250 million roses are grown for Valentine's Day. And it is, Dave's pointing out, believe it or not, it is busier than Mother's Day. In the run up to February 14th, the Miami airport processes about 940 million stems of cut flowers. 90% of those flowers go through Miami. The other 10% go through Los Angeles. So it's about 1,500 tons of flowers arriving to the US every single day. And that equals about 90,000 tons of flowers worth $450 million in just January and February. We're going to go on to our evaluators for the day. And our first evaluator is Margot. Margot, can you tell us how David did? Margot Bittner.
Thank you, Tracy. Today, Dave definitely demonstrated his experience. He set the stage. He checked his props to make sure that we could see what he was going to use as his visuals. He added to his background by telling us the history behind what he's doing, why he has this bucket list. So what was on his agenda? First of all, telling us the background. Past birthdays, he always did something special. He wanted to come visit us again in Lockport. But this bucket list was the creation of something different, something that included many, many aspects of things he always wanted to do. And he used his visuals to take us step by step through it. And what was neat about that for me was he didn't have to use a lot of words. As you could look at the visuals of the restaurant, you could imagine the meal and experience what he was. He gave us the history of it without going into too much detail. The visuals added a lot, excuse me, to his speech. But when you evaluate, what you're looking for is how do you improve? So I've got a couple suggestions for him this morning. Number one, when you had a challenge in the beginning, when your visuals weren't doing what they want, instead of apologizing, how about saying, let's try this again, or one more time? So the audience wasn't saying, well, what's going on now? We're thinking, okay, let's see how we can help him or what's going on. And the other, and I'm going to put on my other hat, my crown here. Dave, we have too much of an influence on you now. You had a few too many gunnas. You were dropping a couple other letters into. So I think if you slow down a little bit and watch those aspects of your speech, it would just bump it up that much more. But for your denouement, what I loved was the call to action, and you were blunt. This is a call to action. Make your bucket list. Go out and do it. So I wish you a bon voyage on your trip. I appreciate that you demonstrated your experience. You had your agenda, your visuals, your improvement, and your denouement. Put that all together. Of course, it spells David. And I'm looking forward to hearing about the speech, about the trip when you return. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Margot. Our second evaluator is Mike Licata, and he will be evaluating Mark Campos. Mike, can you tell us about Mark's speech?
Good morning again, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, our guests, and especially Mark. Mark, I want to thank you for your speech this morning. You're an experienced Toastmaster. You've won many awards in the club, and you just continue to impress everyone in the club. Your firm presence behind the lectern means that we are able to take everything you said seriously, and you did a good job of mixing in humor with your speech. In your storytelling, you did everything that the evaluation sheet says. So I want to commend you on that, and simply weaving in your story on Christmas in the snow. You took care of your family. You took care of everything going around you. And you also had one of those great experiences, serendipitous experiences that happen given dire circumstances or adverse circumstances. You don't have to worry. You projected really well. You projected your voice incredibly well too. There was no distraction when you moved away from the microphone, when you were behind the lectern. So I have very little improvement. We are all limited by the lectern when we're in the room because it is harder to do with the camera and the microphone and all the other things that we have to take into account doing these hybrid meetings. So some of the suggestions I would do is, I know you interrupted yourself to give yourself a side note on the speech. That was a little bit distracting. You were limited by the lectern and your ability to walk around the room, but I think we're all limited when we speak in person. The other thing I have to commend you on is you had a very solid beginning, middle, and end of speech. And I also have to give you a lot of credit because you didn't rush the end of your speech at all. Well, some of us, especially the newer Toastmasters, still have a tendency when we see the light to rush our ending, to wrap it up quicker. You didn't do that. You did a great ending with a point about your old experiences. Overall, it was a really solid speech. I want to thank you for sharing the story, and I want to congratulate you on your retirement, and we look forward to many more speeches on your new experiences. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Mike. And our final evaluator will be Marty Johnston. He'll be evaluating Dave Licata. Marty, can you tell us about Dave's speech?
Thank you, Tracy, fellow Toastmasters, and especially David, for the opportunity to evaluate you on a speech that you're going to be using in the area contest. I'd like to applaud you, Dave, for starting the speech by asking a question to get the audience involved. I think you did a good job with that. You asked, does anyone know the distance we are from the world's most important man-made waterway? And it got people to think at 7 o'clock in the morning about that. You had good supporting evidence and stories of building the Erie Canal throughout your speech. A couple times I felt like I was right there standing next to the people that were doing that. And the speech was to inspire the audience. I felt inspired. I am currently less than a mile from the canal on Church Street. And I actually had a grandfather that was a lock operator on the canal. So I do have a deep connection with the Erie Canal. And I felt that even if someone wasn't connected with the canal, just by your stories and your descriptions made people, if you will, become infatuated with the canal, with your history and your research that you did. How could you improve the speech? I would say vocal variety. You could use vocal variety to increase the effectiveness of your speech. And one specific example I can give you, David, when you were talking about the men that had the idea and they were trying to sell the idea and they brought it to the president at the time, Thomas Jefferson, I would have liked to have heard you in Thomas Jefferson's voice say, "You guys are out of your mind. What are you going to do? Build this canal?" You know, increase the vocal variety a couple times throughout the speech. And then towards the end, I liked your conclusion and you wrapping everything up. I would have liked to have heard you hit more on trying to get people involved in inspiring people to do something with the canal. Because as you said, it is the world's most important man-made waterway. But I was looking for something at the end for a little bit more inspiration. And I think if you can find that missing piece, I think you'll have a winning speech at the area contest, David. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you to all of our evaluators today. We are going to find out how each of them did in their time. Len, can you tell us about their times?
Certainly, Madam Toastmaster. All three contestants once again qualified. Margot at 2:19, Mike Licata at 2:47, and Marty with the buffer at 3:15. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you. So if you'll take a moment and vote for either Margot, Mike Licata, or Marty Johnson. So there's a lot of strange facts that you might not know about Valentine's Day. One of them being my mom is probably the first person that ever used emojis. And for all of our Valentine's Day cards, she would cover them with X's and O's. And that's where we learned about the X's and O's. And did you know the X's first came when it was thought because people didn't know how to sign their name. So they would mark an X and then kiss it. So that's how the X's became the kisses, and O's nobody really knows except for they feel it's the opposite. They're the hugs, but nobody knows how they came about, only that it's the opposite of an X. Also, physicians in the 1800s commonly advised their patients to eat chocolate in order to calm their pining for lost love. So if you like not feeling well about your Valentine's Day, call your physician this year. And Richard Cadbury produced, not perverted, produced the first box of chocolates for this holiday in the 1800s. And this is the most interesting part. Do you know 15% of the women send themselves chocolate and buy themselves jewelry for Valentine's Day? And yes, and Margot saying, yes, they do. However, did you know Galentine's Day is a real day? It happens on February 13th, and this is when all your girlfriends go out for brunch. And it came to be a tradition based on the sitcom Parks and Recreation. I didn't really know about this until the other night. We were in Medina, and one of the bars was celebrating Galentine's night. But as they give each other gifts, one of the quotes says, we need to remember what's important in life: friends, waffles, and work. Or you could say waffles, friends, and work. It really doesn't matter, just as long as friends and waffles comes first and work is third. But for now, we are going to go on to our reports for the day and our I'm going to use word master second. Our master, Eric, can you tell us how we did in our ahs and ums for the day? Eric.
Oh, of course. Of course. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. All right. We had several members use a lot of ands today, of more than 5. Mark, Mr. Licata, David Jones. David Jones, and as Margot said, use a lot of guttas. Tracy had more than 5. Steve had 4. And Steve, I was kept looking at the screen of how the lights of the timing lights was on your beard. I thought that was funny. Anyway, Margot had 3 ands as far as I heard, and 5 so's. Maggie, you had a And Mark had more than 5 butts. Dave Licata had 4 so's and butts. And that's all I have for reports, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Eric. We're going to have to keep track of our ahs, buts, and so's from now on. And now, since I'm going to invite up our general evaluator to tell us what his thoughts are of the meeting. Steve Smith, can you tell us, evaluate our meeting for the day? Steve Smith.
Call up the word master later, or? Okay. Get our notes straight here. Thank you. Now, my job as general evaluator means I got to evaluate the evaluator. Everybody gets evaluated. Now, all 3 evaluators today had a tough job because they, as usual, are evaluating pretty good speakers, well-trained speakers, and they all did a good job for it. As Margot pointed out, our job as evaluators is to look for some area to improve. Tough to do with these seasoned speakers, but they did. All 3 of them found some areas that they felt could be improved. So the evaluators did their job. I, however, didn't do mine. I should have been here for the start of the meeting, and due to the weather conditions, we didn't quite make it on time. So I can't comment that the meeting started on time or not because I wasn't here. So, but things were rolling in this packed house here today. And she had a great theme. I learned things. I did not know there could be as many as 3 St. Valentines, and 2 of them were executed. No, I didn't know any of that. So she had some good filler material. She kept the meeting running, took care of problems. I have no criticism anywhere about the meeting. And I was surprised that I got caught up in a few gunners. I don't usually do that. Good catch, Eric. And I too was fascinated watching my beard change colors on the monitor. And I got to wondering which one would be more appropriate for St. Patrick's Day, which is coming up, my green beard or the red beard. Either one would fit. Red beard. Wasn't he a pirate? Never mind. Anyway, so I think we had a good meeting. Do you wish me to call the? Yeah, okay. We have one more report to hear from today, and that is our word master, which is whom? Phil Russell. Oh yeah, Phil. How did we do with whatever the heck your word was?
Well, Mr. Mr. General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters, and our guest, infatuation was the word. It was not where we used it first, but our Toastmaster used it. Lenny used it later on. Beth, and Maggie and Richard, of course, during table topics used it. Then we go on and two speakers used it. David Jones and Mark Campos. They both used it twice. Dave Licata, but it didn't seem to fit into his speech, so I give him an excuse on that. Margot used it, and Marty Johnston used it. Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you. I was looking at that wonderful backdrop you have there with all the stars, and I did pick out the Orion constellation over your left shoulder, so that's very interesting. I'll call our Toastmaster back up, and we'll finish this out.
All right, the step stool is a little bit more difficult than I thought. However, thank you. So please, everybody's voted for that. I am going to call on our guests. Richard, can you tell us, especially as our Area 11 director, can you tell us what you thought of our meeting and how we did for the day?
I thought it was really enjoyable. And one of the things I got a little bit of a history lesson about the Erie Canal, which was really good. And I didn't come off of mute, but when he was talking about when he spoke to Thomas Jefferson, you know, what was going through his head and who else was working on the canal. And I live near the C&O Canal's a few miles away, but I've actually walked a part of that. So I thought that was very interesting and kind of connected. So really appreciate that. Madam Toastmaster, I do have like a couple of bullets I want to go and mention, if that's okay. Not just about the meeting, but in the area in general. So one thing I want to point out is your club has only 2 officers trained so far, and you need to have 4. And this is the month to do it because you got to have it in by the end of the month. There is officer training today at noon. If some of the officers that didn't take training could do that. And there's another officers training that is scheduled for Friday the 21st at 7 p.m. Or I'm sorry, that was the wrong one. Monday the 24th at 6:30 p.m. So if you can attend those, that would be great. You guys are very close to being distinguished club. You just need one more goal. That would be the goal that you could complete. So it's a very easy one to accomplish. So I'm looking forward to you guys being distinguished club. And so I'm hoping that you guys will do that. Also, don't forget to go out to the district website, look at the training. There's a lot of great training out there this month. And I do want to call particular attention on the 17th, next Monday. There is a training at 7 p.m., which is Share Your Why, Reach the Sky. And the district is asking clubs to submit a short video of their members saying what their why is, why they're in Toastmasters. And it's for the conference will be the first time it's shown. And then it will be used on social media to promote Toastmasters in our district. So I highly encourage somebody, you know, a couple people from the club to attend that training and learn more about it. I don't know too much about it other than what I've told you, but just looking forward to clubs in the area actually submitting those. So I'd love to see one from you guys. I'd appreciate that. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Richard. And I'll speak on behalf of our officers. I don't see any of them in the room, but I know that we are all trying. Eric, did you want to say anything? Because I know we are trying very hard to meet all of our goals. We're used to being a distinguished club. Eric, did you want to speak?
Yes. Just talked to David Jones. Richard, David Jones to send you a message that I did attend the officer training through the other districts. So,
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. I'll make sure
but
Jillian knows that.
okay, yep.
And thank you to also, is it Marty and Mary who attended officer training so far? I believe in person.
It was just Marty. Mary didn't
Oh.
go to the officer training.
Okay,
Awesome. So
great work, Marty.
we are well on our way. We will make Distinguished Club as we do every year. I'm going to go.
Is the training at noon on a Zoom link somewhere?
Yes, it is. If you go to the district website, there's two places you can look. And actually, don't mind, I'm going to share, if I can share my screen real quick, I'm going to do that. So.
I can show you that, Mom, too, after the meeting.
Okay.
All
Sounds
right,
good.
but there's, if the Zoom thing wasn't in my way. So there at the, oh, I'm sorry. I guess I'm going to have to do it. Under events, there's events calendar and there's upcoming training. Either one of them you go to. You can actually, I'm going to go to the events calendar because this one's more up to date. This would be the better place to go. I try to keep the other one up to date. But today, oh, actually, yeah, let me see. I'm in the wrong one. I'm sorry. So you just click on it. You do have to click the register link and it'll take you to a form, that Zoom form that you fill out. And that will send the link to your email for the Zoom meeting. But yeah, just make sure you do that. And the
Thank you, Richard.
and the later one is also a Zoom meeting, so you can do the same thing. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm sure we will move forward on all of those. I'm going to announce our winners today. And because we're almost to the end, and grammarian's report. Sorry, I'm really good now.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Just a quick report. Beth said, worshiping bones doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Very unique choice of words. Maybe worshiping bones never made a lot of sense to me, but we got your point, certainly. Jill said, don't know if there's anybody that can fulfill this question. A little bit awkward. Don't know if there's anybody who can tackle or respond to this question. Richard's having to have leftovers seemed a little bit redundant, using have twice in a sense. Maybe having to scrounge leftovers or having to enjoy leftovers. David Jones, I believe I heard you say a infatuation. It is, of course, an infatuation. Dave Licata invented so many ways. Instead of ways, David, how about methods or technologies or workarounds? I did like Mountain Ridge, though. I never had heard that was the name of Lockport prior to the locks and the canal. Mike Licata, I want to commend you on that. Then do it. I commend you on that. And actually later on in your evaluation, you did say, I commend you. Some of your sentences were incomplete. Try and just form the entire sentence in your head before you speak. It makes it flow a little bit better. And Marty said, well, he said a lot of things, but he danced around a term at the end. I think what he was searching for is a call to action, and those words just didn't come to him. He was looking for a call to action in Dave Licata's speech. That's all I heard at this hour in the morning. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you. And we have just enough time to announce our winners for the day. So, table topics. Drum roll, please. Mr. Richard Teal, our Area 11 Director. Our best evaluator for the day is Margot Bittner. Margot. And our biggest winner for the day is our best speaker, David Jones. And Jill is pulling out the ticket. Yeah, Jill's pulling out the ticket for our 50-50 club winner, who will be ending in 837. Dave Licata, 1. Our 50-50. I think he's buying breakfast this morning.
That's the
And
second time this week.
Eric, did you want to end our meeting for the day?
I'm going to have a couple of announcements, and I'll turn it over to Kate because she is the presiding officer. For the club officers, we do have a meeting Monday night at 7 o'clock. We'll use the same meeting link, and we have lots to talk about. And the Area 11 and 12 contest is next Saturday at the Rhinestein Memorial Library in Cheektowaga. So, with that, Ma'am Immediate Past President, would you like to close out the meeting?
I would love to. Hey, Richard, are you flying in from Virginia for the area concert? At least the conference.
No, I won't be at the area, but I will be at the district conference. Yes, I will be there, but I'm not flying in. I'm going to drive up. So yeah.
It will be good to see you in person. I just have a suggestion for Dave Licata before I forget. Your finale could be something about the bicentennial. It's the 200th anniversary of the canal being launched in 1825 with 2025. So maybe I thought you tied it in the first time you gave this speech. So that could be a wonderful way to do that. And I will say, to echo what Richard called to action on the officer training, they are better and briefer all the time. I will say the efficiency of our district leadership, including Richard and everyone else at the division and district level, has been fantastic. And I imagine you're all doing breakfast. Those of you in town, drive safely, everybody on the road today. Have a wonderful Valentine's Day and President's Weekend. And we'll see you next week. Does anyone know the Toastmaster of the day next week? So we can throw that in before we wrap up. I know we're down to the wire now. Anyone? And thank you again, Len and Mark, for jumping in as